pivot stories of how you have managed the last 2 years, whether that's personally, whether that's professionally. We've all been through a lot, and it's changed us. And I don't think we actually have really had a chance to talk about, as a group, how this has affected us, not just our businesses, but our livelihoods. I don't know if any of you saw in the US, the Center for Disease Control, CDC, just put out an article that said that they now recommend that everyone under the age of 65 be tested for anxiety. Yeah, there's a real, and I mean, like, but let's be honest, who in the last year has felt really anxious? There is huge implications that are going on that happened both during the pandemic and even after, as we're adjusting to a new normal, can I say? I wanted to talk about it. So I'm gonna bring two really fantastic people to the stage that I love. One of them you've heard from already. The other you're going to hear from right now. The first person I would like to bring is Wanda Duncan. Wanda, come on up to the stage. Wanda has been working and traveling as a digital nomad since 2016. She's the founder of Black Women Travel, a thriving community of Black women who center travel, wellness, and I lost my place, thank you, Wanda, and creating online streams of income. Join the Nomad Crew Collective, listen to the weekly show, Black Women Travel Podcast, and attend the annual travel conference just for Black women, the International Black Women Travel Jubilee. Wanda, you're the best. Thanks for being here. Woo! Oh, I made it to the microphone. Sorry. Is this the right seat? Yes.
We use the on button.
You get to decide. You get to choose today, Wanda.
Okay.
All right, let me bring up the other amazing person here, Pola Henderson. Pola, get over here. Where are you? I saw you come in. Come on up. Pola Henderson. Pola is a Paris-based Polish-American writer, speaker, and communication consultant. She works as a content manager for a French company and runs Jetting Around Media for a boutique agency providing content and digital communication services for brands and destinations. She's been featured in CNN, NPR, BBC Sport, TechCrunch, among others, and has worked on B2B and B2C marketing campaigns with organizations on both sides of the Atlantic, including the European Commission. Pola for being here.
Thanks, Beth. Hi, everyone. Do you know it?
Oh, she's real person.
I mean, I'm Polish American, so.
Don't feel bad. Well, thank you both for being put on the spot to talk about this, because I think, as we discussed, this is something that everybody has their own story. Everyone has their own story of how they've pivoted. I want to hear just a little glimpse of both of you. Where were you in 2019? And then what happened? Let's get a little bit of like what has brought you between 2019 and now. Wanda, do you want to start?
I sure will, Beth.
Yeah,
So
okay,
in
great.
So in 2019, I was hanging out in Malaysia, as one does, and 2020 came around, and they were like, something's running around in the streets, killing everybody. I was very scared for my life, and Malaysia was like, hey girl, tourist visa, we don't care, everybody sit still. I had a flight to Singapore that never happened, and I was just there, watching the world melt. But not that song, I Watch the World Melt With You, not that one. So, that's what it was. I had this conference that I had been planning that tickets had just gone on sale for. And I'm hanging out in Malaysia on an expired tourist visa. So, that's what happened.
I love that you're just laughing about that now. That must not have been very funny.
Well, I mean, like, what was you gonna do? I wasn't going back to America. I couldn't. So, I don't know. Maybe I was laughing. I don't remember the exact, but maybe I wasn't laughing. I was crying on the inside because I was like, but my conference.
Okay, so we got you to March of 2020.
Yeah.
Pola, let's get you now. Where were you between 2019 and March of 2020?
Well, besides living La Vie en Rose in Paris in 2019, I was planning a trip for my big birthday, 21st, to New Zealand for, wait for this, March 2020. even remember turning that number. That's actually not so bad. But I was in Paris. I was working for a tech company, and I was still running my travel blog, Jetting Around. And then 2020 happened.
So let's talk about 2020. So what did you do? What did you do? How did you, Wanda, you're kind of figuring out where am I even going to live. I'm just like, that was the first one, right? The first International Travel Jubilee. Okay, so the first one, you're like, okay, clearly this isn't going to work in at least the way I had envisioned in this moment. Pola, you're living in Paris. You have Jetting Around, but it's also going through its own transition.
That's right.
So what happens next? Tell us more.
So my community is online. I didn't think that I was just gonna travel to anywhere and see just a gang of Black women. So like I had built that online already. And the conference was supposed to be our first time in person. So I was like, I mean, I guess I could do something online, but we already online anyway, so like, what's the point? That's the voice I used to say that. And so it was like a reluctant, like, I guess we'll do it online. So I planned for it to be online, but everything else, you know, so the community is a weekly podcast. That never stopped because it didn't have to. So I just kept that going. And our Facebook group and our private community as well. So all the other pieces, nothing changed. I could just keep doing what I was doing. It was just this first in-person conference that had changed, so.
But your focus had always been on digital nomads, on Black women digital nomads. What was it like for you to be in this space of bringing together this group of digital nomads, and then suddenly our industry was kind of forced into that space too? Like, did you see that change as it was happening? What were like the stories? How were you processing this monumental shift that we were all going through by necessity, that you had kind of chosen, you know, to create your business around before? That was a hard question.
No, it's just the answer. So it's like everything got quiet, everybody was inside, everybody's on house arrest, right? So Black people were still dying, and it was loud because we all still have the internet. Why did they cut that off? I don't know. Because a lot of people were online who didn't want to be online, and there's just like all this anxiety, and then we're able to focus on racism. We're able to focus on collective pain, right? And it was just awful. And so then you have a response to that, which is we need to get out of America. So then you have these terms popping up, you know, Exodus, Blaxit. So people are trying to figure how to get out, but it's a response, it's a knee jerk, right? It's not okay, I've done America, she's cute or whatever, but I feel like there are more options out there in my life for me. It's not what are you moving towards, it's what you're trying to get away from. And so, like, that's icky, because nobody wants to be on the run, right? And then there's the whole, like, okay, this is a thing that the United Nations is recognizing. Can we get refugee status somewhere, honestly? So that was also like popping up a little bit. So it's the quality of people. It is, what does community care look like in this moment for those who this idea has just landed on? How do you nurture that? Is this something that they're serious about making happen in their lives, or are they just in pain? So there's just a lot to sift through when it comes to being a Black person, being a Black woman, and someone who loves travel and maybe had never considered that travel could be a life for them. They could live abroad, like for real, not just taking the vacations or whatever. So that's what it was like. You're just sitting with this, you're just watching all of this happen, and you're trying to understand what to do in the moment, how to act in integrity, with who you are and what's happening. And then also this response coming from everywhere, all these new groups popping up, Tulum bust through the seams. So, yeah, just like it's like factions, all these factions just popping up. It's just like, is there an opportunity to collaborate? Like, what's the conversation that's happening right now? Who are these other people who are starting these movements or taking their businesses or their brands into another direction as well? And how can we contribute something to the conversation? How can we contribute to the real life change in other people's lives?
Well, I'm going to bring you into this because you were going through this change already for yourself before the pandemic even hit. How was that process for you, making this transition and then perhaps this transition accelerating in a lot of ways?
Okay, to answer this question, I have to go back a little bit in time to 2015. I won't take long. That's the year when I started sharing my time between Chicago and Paris in preparing for my permanent move. This is something that had been on my mind for years, but I had a nice life in Chicago. I had a husband, I had a mortgage, I had a cat. So it wasn't really possible to move to Paris when I first wanted to. But in 2015, a lot of things had already happened in my life, personally, professionally. There was a burnout, there was a breakup. The cat was getting older. And so I started going to Paris in 2015, which also was not an easy year for France, but Paris especially with terrorist attacks. And I ended up moving to Paris 3 months after the November 2015 attacks. And at that time, I moved to Paris knowing 3 people and having some credit cards and a little bit of savings, no connections, no job, but I had jetting around. Back then it was called jetting around because it was mostly my blog. And I quickly realized that I had to transition it into something else. Content writing, content marketing was starting to be a bigger thing. So this is what I focused on at first. Again, I was in a foreign country, I knew basic French, I had no connections. So jetting around was my anchor, it was my ticket to creating my new life in Paris. But I also knew that France is, compared to, let's say, the US, is a more traditionally structured society. In order to even open a bank account or have a chance for a good apartment, you better have a French contract, full-time French contract. So being a digital nomad, writing about the best cafes in Paris all the time, not really feasible, definitely would not have paid bills. So I had to do something. So I looked at the skills I had, the experience, the education, everything. I said, what else can I do with this? I ended up getting certified in SEO, which is ironic because for 10 years of travel blogging, I never did that. I did it after I decided to archive my blog in 2020. That's coming later.
Of course.
Yes, but I knew that with my skills, my educations, I could have my own blend that I could do something with. And at first, just to pay the bills, I was teaching business English, and I actually do have an educational background. I used to be an educator. And then, one day, I came home for just a bit in between clients, and I went to a Facebook group, because that's where life happens, right? And I saw...
Life happens on Facebook. That's their new Facebook group.
No, this is a Facebook group for expats in Paris, and it's a lifesaver. Because nobody gives you a brochure when you land at Charles de Gaulle. So you have to learn things. And I saw this ad for a content manager job, fully remote, and that was 2019, early 2019, before the pandemic, before the general business realized that you could be productive without being in a physical office. So I saw this like, wow, this is content writing, this is community management, it's a tech company, it's a startup, it's international, it's exciting, and it pays. And I can do it remotely. We did have an office 5 minutes from my apartment in Paris. But I dropped everything I was doing. I was late for my next client, sorry. But then I sent my CV, well, we say CV in France, I got the job. And you know what, this gave me this peace of mind that, you know, I had this thing that was still writing, whether I write about an online product or, you know, a travel product or a destination, it's the same mechanism. So I was, okay, this is it. This is the one thing in my life that's not going well. Okay, I can breathe now. And then I can go back to writing about travel, because travel and writing, my two biggest passions, so travel writing, obviously, you know, it's an explosive combination, and I wanted to do that more. So I did for a while, and also my blog, I started it in 2010, and I always wanted it to be about what Wanda talked about so beautifully, a community. I never wanted it to be about, look where I've been. This is not about, travel writing is not about showing up, it's about inspiring people to see places and experience things and connect with others. So I always wanted to have a community. So I had, looking back at 2019, I still had my Twitter chat, I had my online and offline meetups called Jet and Round Cafe. They had started in Chicago. I took them on the road with me to many places in America and Europe. And I started hosting them every month in Paris. And I was very happy when, in addition to expats, French people started to show up. And those events became bilingual. And they tried to force me to speak French, but I was like, okay, this is travel talk over coffee, not over wine. Oh yeah, I had to rebrand. That was the first thing I had to change. It used to be called Travel Talk Over Coffee, but then I changed it to Travel Talk Over Wine, and we had to start doing it later, and not in coffee shops, but in wine bars. When in France, right? It's not a stereotype. So I started doing these events that, for me, were great, because when you move to another country, I'm sure a lot of you know, you don't have a community offline. You have an online community, but three-dimensional people, that's a different story. And you know, you get to feel, there's this thing called expat loneliness. You feel like, you know, you're living your best life, but you know, you don't have those roots in your new place. So your friends become your family, and you strive to create that community. So instead of going to some events, I was creating my own event, and I was meeting people. And one of my best friends, Parisian, she came to J Cafe a few years ago, and we've been besties ever since. But then in 2020, these events had to go online. So we started doing online events, and it was actually great because my old Chicago crew was able to join, and my Paris crew, and some of them met, and it was great. But then I also started thinking about my blog. I'm like, what do I write about? Like Wanda said, what do we do now? And France had one of the strictest lockdowns ever. March 2020, it was March 17th, I know, because it was 2 days after my birthday, 2 days after I came back, not from New Zealand, that still hasn't happened, back from Martinique, that was plan B. I came back from 2 weeks on empty beaches, freedom, to very, very strict lockdown rules. And apartments in Paris are pretty small. I was living in a studio, and in 2 months, I left it exactly 3 times. I was going stir crazy. So talk about not having any motivation or inspiration to write about travel because you are cooped up in this very, very small space. So I was like, okay, well, the blog has just been sitting there. I really don't feel like doing anything online. What do I do now? And after consideration, I decided that 10 years of travel blogging is enough, and but I don't want it to be a wasted time, because that 10 years was a great time. And I'm not even talking about the cool stuff like press trips. Okay, that happened, yes, wonderful. But all the places I got to see, all the people I got to meet that are still in my life, and actually Beth is one of them. We met back in Chicago. I went to one of the first wonderful events. It was back when it was Go Girl Travel. And it was called the Travel Cafe. I remember, yes. And so it was great, but it also, that 10 years gave me the skills and the experience to pivot, to apply these skills to something else. So I decided to archive the blog and give myself some time to figure out what I want to do. I knew I did not want to be an influencer. I don't want to be on Instagram, TikTok. I don't want my life to be projected online all the time. And if this is something that you're doing and it brings you joy and income, don't listen to me, but also please don't put poison in my coffee. We are all different. We all can love, appreciate, and share travel in many different ways. So at that time, in 2020 more or less, when I was doing online events, I was not writing my blog anymore. I was trying to figure out, how do I still write about travel, because this is the passion. But I just needed to find the way that would excite me again.
And I want to talk about that. I don't want to get you too far into what you did, because I think this pivot, and the two of you are up here because you've gone in very different directions in terms of what your pivot is. But I actually think the internal process that you went through is very similar in sort of identifying what is right for me. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask, as content creators, all of us, we are leaders in a lot of ways, right? Like, that's the whole point of this business, is we're writing something or sharing something, and somebody else is reading or absorbing that content in some way. And I wonder, and for you especially, Wanda, as a community builder, did you feel like while you were going through this in the onset of the pandemic, that you had a sort of responsibility or feel a particular weight to maybe process this faster so that you could be a leader for your community and kind of help them process that? Like, how did you manage that kind of internal struggle as somebody who was putting themselves out there in a public space?
Absolutely not.
You're like, nope, I got myself.
No, I think it's important for you to be who you are. You could be a leader, but that's not gonna escalate. And I'm not rushing nothing for nobody else. Like, that's not the point. What is the point of creating something and you being responsive like you were in the system that you were in before? My mom passed away and I show up to CNN the next day because I can't get a hold of my supervisor and I don't want to be seen as unresponsible. I'm not doing that again. So you're gonna get what you get when you get it, always with me, always. And I might feel some kind of way about it because, we're used to being productive. We're used to being like, oh, people are waiting for stuff and I need to have this stuff. You're gonna get it when you get it. If you down, you down. If you not, I don't care. Like, if it costs me money, then it costs me money. But it's not gonna cost me my sanity, ever. It's not gonna cost me my process, ever. So I absolutely felt no responsibility to rush who I'm becoming and how I'm responding in the moment, just because there are other people. We can do this together. That was the whole purpose of the community in the first place, was, to be this uplifting place for us to be able to come together when it comes to stuff like this, that matters, that it touches us in a particular way. And so, yeah, we could do this together, but I'm not. This isn't fast food. Like, this is organic. Homegrown.
Slow cooker.
Yeah.
Pola, how about you? Did you feel like you needed to say or do anything, especially as you were in this transition? You had built a following. What did you say to your audience, if anything, during that time?
It's not easy to have an audience and then say, you know what, I'm just not going to blog anymore. You have a feeling of, FOMO, of course. But then again, you know what? Okay, maybe they follow me for whatever reason. Maybe they like my writing, maybe they like my photos, maybe they were bored. But there are other people. I mean, we're not heart surgeons, There can be another blogger tomorrow with something interesting to say, and I don't want to say we're replaceable, but I don't want to be all like, oh my God, look, my content is awesome, people should follow me. So what I did is, because I didn't want to feel the pressure to be on social media and depend on social media for my income, I wanted it to be fun again. I've always been a Twitter girl, so I decided to keep my Twitter, and I still have a community there, we still chat. It's fun. Sometimes we meet offline, and I decided to keep my Facebook group, and I try to redirect people from my fan page to the Facebook group. Those people who really want to stick around and talk, and also share their stories. Again, it's a community, you know, and if my story sparks a discussion, that's great. So now I do it for fun. I also decided to keep my newsletter. That was one of the first things I did as a blogger, so I still have my list. And you know, people sometimes reply to my newsletter. Great to hear from you. So this is what you've been up to, you know. So I still have, whenever I have a craving to share some travel content, I can do it, but I do it without any pressure. And I think doing things without pressure is, if there's anything that the pandemic taught us, I think it's that, to really focus on our needs, not what our perceived expectations are. Maybe the people, you know, the 20,000 people I had on the Facebook page, maybe they don't miss me at all, you know, and that's okay, that's okay. I had other plans for 2020. When I stopped actively travel blogging, I wanted to start writing some things to publish, but I just wasn't in the right headspace. And 2020 is nothing. 2021, for me, was worse. Because, and not to bum everybody out, this is a happy occasion, but somebody in my inner circle was diagnosed with cancer, been given 3 months to live. Then 2 other people followed. One of them is no longer with us. But that person, very, very close to me, a close family member, became my focus. And my content creation, even my day job, took a backseat because I was determined to help as much as I could with any possible treatment costs and things like that. So I knew that I had to, the projects I would take on would have to be well paid because I had that in mind. Before that, I was saving up to buy my own apartment in Paris. But then I said, no, I'm going to keep that money because that person that is so dear to me might need it. So the pandemic, followed by that diagnosis, it was like being hit with a baseball bat. That really just took the air out of me. But it had to happen. I had to feel almost helpless to really refocus. And I knew that actually this year would be the year of changes for me. That job in technology that I had, that I told you about before, I enjoyed it for a couple of years, I really did. And then it just became not important. Having somebody close to me go through everything that you go through when you have cancer, it just really shifted my perspective. I said, you know what, that is just a job. I might as well get another one. I stuck around because, again, financial goals, but I knew I would leave. And actually, last week, I started a new job and I'm finally excited about going to work again. You know, I get to work on bigger projects and all that. And it's actually in B2B events, so yes, physical events are back. I'm so happy.
Wanda, did you want to add something to that? I saw your little hand up. Okay, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, you were going to say something. At some point, you were going to say something. Microphone turned off.
I'm a podcaster, I'm always turning my back.
Turn your mic off when you're not talking. No. Well, and I think this is, so, Pola, thank you for sharing that, because I also think that we don't talk enough in professional, you know, when we're in a professional context, it's like we only talk about the professional, but there was a lot personally that we were all going through. I know I lost people in COVID. I think we all had a moment of realizing, okay, we have to just focus on getting through, you know, survival really. And I think that has changed how I look at things even today, where I had this amazing opportunity brought to me in May, and it was on my daughter's birthday, and I was like, no, it's my daughter's birthday. And it's like, normally you'd be like, oh, whatever, she'll have other birthdays, but I was like, no, this is important now. You know, this matters now, much more now that I've been through this. And I think, you know, I love that both of you have had a moment of really coming to terms with who you are, what you want out of this life, what you want for your career, but also what you want for your livelihoods. Both of you were living abroad in a new place, in a few different places. I'd love to hear about that process of deciding for yourself what you wanted to do with this part of your life.
Pass it down the line.
Yeah.
It's a process that's constantly processing. So it's like you're a living test. You're constantly calibrating, you're constantly reacting to what's happening to make meaning of it. So it's like, I'm showing up in this way, and this is what I want out of how I'm showing up. And is this what's happening? The thing that I want. And if that's not what's happening, then it's just like, okay, start over again. So if Johnny leaves Warsaw at 2 p.m. going 60 kilometers an hour, it's like, so it's just this constant equation. This is what I want, this is what I want. And usually what we want is a feeling. And so we're doing these things because we think that it will make us feel a certain kind of way, right? But there's other ways to have the feeling. So it's not necessarily the thing that you're doing to get that feeling. So how is it that I want to feel? And I take it back there. How is it that I want to feel? And what else can I try to embody that feeling? Who else can I be to embody that feeling? And that's where everything comes out. So it's easier to let go, because we just kind of dig right in, don't we? We just gotta get on TikTok, gotta get on Instagram, gotta keep my Twitter active, gotta get LinkedIn going, Facebook, yes, go, post. And so
Really? Because I'm like, yeah, screw it.
right, but that was a conscious decision you made, and like a lot of people feel like that's a privilege to opt out because they don't know how else to be in front of people without that, because that's what we've become, right?
Yeah, and this could be a whole other discussion.
It's a whole other thing.
But a discussion we should have, like right now, yes. Because there is a lot of that pressure of, okay, right, who's been like, oh my God, okay, now I have to get a TikTok. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Like, I felt that. I think I have one. I think I have like 3 followers.
And now Christina's trying to get us into Web3, and so we got to do that too.
And I'm not saying that's not important. I'm not saying that's not important, because I think these channels are important, but I think there's also a certain point in time where you have to decide what are the ones that are right for you to focus your attention on based on your audience. And I think there's a lot of pressure to just do all of it, and maybe you do decide, yes, video is what I need to do, Web3, and now I need to abandon something that I used to do that is no longer, you have to make those very purposeful decisions for yourself. Okay, I'm out.
That's exactly the point. And so it's like, how am I feeling? Am I feeling burnt out because I'm trying to show up everywhere raggedy, like cross-posting all this content? I'm trying to make the blog, make the video from the blog, or make a blog from the video, and post this and cut this up and chop and do the shorts and like all this stuff. And so it's like, how do I want to feel? What if the things that I'm doing, even if I'm getting results from them, is this the life that I envisioned for myself? And normally it's not, because it's a response to the outer world. It's not from the inside out, it's from the outside in. Because you're doing something and you want people to attach to what it is that you're doing so that you could make a living, so that you could get the clicks, so that you could get the views or whatever, so you could get the subscribers, so you can get them to come to your conference in Tbilisi, Georgia last weekend. So,
And you cannot half-ass it, because people will know if there's no passion left.
well, I mean, some people like half-ass, but because they don't know what a full ass is, That's real.
And see where I take issue with social media.
That's a quotable.
It is, because it's like, if you are used to people showing up 5 things to do and the dance, the type of content that I make would never fit into those buckets. I'm never going to be a 5 things to do and dance kind of girl, and so I'm never going to get the kind of views I'm never gonna apply for those types of writing opportunities because you're just not going to simmer this down. I'm nuance all day. I am depth all day. And so the people who are attracted to that, like that's not necessarily SEOable. I gotta talk to Isabel about that. But so like, what does that look like? And so there's this dance, and some of it is inside of your head, but if you're a member of Wonderful, if you're a member of Wonderful, then you have some dope ladies that you could talk to about this because inside your head is where everything goes to die. Because we're horrible in there. It's tragic inside there. So you have to get it out. You have to talk about these things. You have to workshop it in order to find what fits. And the world is not going to tell you that. The world is going to create your avatar and like, you know, get your SEO together and like show up on one platform and rock it. You know, you got your Tim Ferriss going on. Because they want it cut. They want it. You want the easy thing, you want the deliverables, you want the recipe. You want the recipe, everybody wants the shortcuts, but life is not that. It never has been. That's just marketing. But you've lived inside your skin for long enough to know that that's not it. And so that's the half-ass to me, the recipes, the distillation of the essence of life. You're getting full ass over here, and it's quite voluptuous, if I say so myself.
I don't think I'm ever gonna forget that one. You're gonna get the full ass. Just have to have it.
But so it is messy though. So
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you for your question. So all of that to say, I don't know what that is the answer. Is that you're just constantly growing out loud and wanting people to ride with you as you get on the bus. Not the bus from last night, because I won't talk about the bus.
We were on the fun bus, so the rest of you were not
supposed to leave on time.
Well, and Pola, you know, this is, okay, so now I want you to try this, because Pola, you decided that this wasn't the path you wanted to stay on. And you did get, you know, full-time job, but even, it's like scary to say that word, full-time job. No, but I think the thing that we need to keep in mind too is that the rules of the game changed, even in the full-time world, right? Talk about your decision to pivot where you did.
Yeah, I think a lot of us in the travel business have quit jobs or have saved up money to travel the world for a year or so. Perfectly fine. And I mentioned a burnout before, and that was in a full-time job in Chicago, rather outside Chicago. And part of the burnout was the commute. It was a killer. I was mentally and physically exhausted. Bumper-to-bumper traffic, if you've ever been to Chicago, yeah. You're an hour and a half coming home from work. And then you just don't have the energy to even move your finger, let alone do anything creative. And then you have to keep paying for chiropractors and massage therapists because everything hurts for driving. So I felt really changed to my desk. It was a break, you would go no natural light. It was just, I mean, you can imagine. A lot of us here have taken steps to escape that kind of life. But that was, when I was going through that, it was 2008 to 2012. Things have changed quite a lot. And right now, thanks to the pandemic, but this shift to what's called management 3.0, more focused on people and their needs and work-life balance, and flexible schedules, flexible locations, that started way before the pandemic, and technology startups were leading that change. But now, thanks to the pandemic, that shift has accelerated, and now it is the job seekers market. I'm fresh off of seeking a job, and I had recruiters coming to me on LinkedIn. I was sending my applications, and I was very, very picky about what I wanted, because when somebody said on-site, I was like, oh, nope. When they said hybrid, I said, okay, well, what do you mean? Oh, 1 day a week. I'm like, no, not gonna happen, because I like to, I have a few remote offices, from America to, to Europe, whatever. And I ended up finding a place my current job, and they said the first thing they said, yeah, it's hybrid 1 day a week in the office. I'm like, oh, you know what, guys, I came from a startup world, full-time remote, and guess what? I signed my contract this week. I'm looking at it. 5 pages of legal speaking French, but I found the most important thing that I was looking for in there. I'm fully remote. And I think I'm the only person in the office that is, because you know what? I asked during the interview, I said, listen, the pandemic has shown you that people can be productive at home or wherever they are comfortable working from. Doesn't mean we watch Netflix at home all the time. Well, not all the time, you know. But, you know, give me the flexibility. And now recruiters and managers, they are starting to get this in their heads that if they want the top talent, so pretty much if they want anybody from this room, they need to provide us what we want, because, you know, if one company doesn't, somebody else will. There are still certain issues. I had to say no to certain jobs that were, on paper, looked amazing, great money, even 6-figure jobs, remote, but with a full-time contract. One was actually based in Chicago, but they were not able to offer me French contract. So this is still a very gray area, because yes, a lot of companies are open to hiring people, digital nomads. You can click from a beach in Thailand, but they still have to figure out the legalities of that. But there is a shift. So my 9 to 5 is not a chain anymore. Also, it helps that I don't work in a great cubicle in the suburb of Chicago. I work near Champs-Élysées. So, you know, that kind of makes you feel a little better. But also because I know that they trusted me enough to say, you know what, okay, you can be fully remote. This is what you do. We trust you. And I was very impressed with the fact that my current boss and the big boss, they actually talked about this before I continued my interview. So everybody was in the loop. So now I get to still do what I love, because in this job, yes, it's a full-time job, I have a contract, but it gives me a sense of stability. And I am not 20 years old anymore. I have to start thinking about things like, you know, retirement money, you know, and of course I have very expensive hobbies like travel, photography, and real estate. So, you know, financial stability is very important to me. But I also have this flexibility, because you know what? People say, oh, you can't have it all. I'm like, yeah, you can, you know. So I have the flexibility, I have the stability, and I get to use everything I've learned on my journey. My background is in English and marketing and communication, so I get to do all that. I'm now involved with events, which is what I've done through JD Media, but now I do it for the full-time job. I write all sorts of content, and great, and I have nice people working with me, so I am starting to create this community. Our team is super international, and you know what, that's great. But I have to say, I feel like after the pandemic and after the whole cancer situation, that is not over yet, but it's going in the right direction. I feel like after these past 2 years, and perhaps you can relate, I feel like I've gone through this storm. Also, a little bit of an identity crisis, because there was at some point a question, do I stay where I am? Do I go? What do I do? But now I feel like I'm on the other side. I mean, I still wear a mask on the Paris Metro because we're not completely done with this. But I feel like I've been through the ringer, and now I'm finally going back to myself from 2020, because there are all these projects I was thinking about, including a book, but I just did not have the mental capacity for it, the spirit to tackle this. So people use the pandemic to write books and things like that. I'm like, well, how did you do that? Because I was like, no, Netflix, you know. But I'm coming back. And one more thing before the next question. You know, when I left Chicago, you know, after the whirlwind of, you know, recession, breakup, whatever, burnout, I never thought I would go through something similar again. But then, hey, you know, 2020 happened, and all the other things happened, and I'm like, wow. But I'm much more prepared to tackle these things now, that's for sure. I think, you know, I mean, this is such a cliche, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think, you know, I hope that for a lot of us it's the case, that we will take something out of that pandemic and turn it into something positive. It's always, every setback is an opportunity.
And I know we have just a few minutes left, and I actually want to bring all of you into this conversation, because I agree. I think, I hate the term silver lining when we're talking about the pandemic, because lives were lost, livelihoods were lost, economies were destroyed, the travel industry really suffered. But I think we all did take a moment to reflect, because that's all we really could do for a couple of years. And I think a lot of us really learned something about ourselves. And I'm curious for all of you, like, what is something that you learned about yourself over the last couple of years? Does anyone want to share anything?
Anyone but her.
I will stand up for that now. Everyone will see me. Thank you. You're welcome. I think the biggest thing...
What's your name, love?
Oh, sorry. Hello, everyone. I'm Tilia. I have a blog called Travel with Tilia. Follow me. Thanks. I think the biggest thing that I learned during the pandemic, I call it the panoramic because I don't like pandemic. The biggest thing I learned from the panoramic is how important I am. Like, as in, I think we all had a moment of just reflection. We had a moment of stillness. We had a moment of, oh, I don't need to tell. Like, I make this joke. I didn't need to tell anybody any excuse to not leave my house, because I personally really loved it. I love being in my house and stuff like that, but I also love traveling. But the biggest thing I learned was that I'm important, my voice is important, how I feel is important, everything about me is important, because for me, I'm going to be living my life. Somebody else's opinion of me, somebody else's way of how they think I should be, is not important to me. That's their business, it's none of mine. But how I feel in myself, that's really important. And how I perceive something, how I feel, how I move, how comfortable I am, that became really important. Because a lot of the time we do stuff, even with like creating content, writing, doing this, we're very like trying to be for somebody else. But when we're doing it from the place of, okay, do you know what, I love this, I feel comfortable in this, I really am passionate about this, it transcends the views, it transcends the likes, it transcends the comments and everything else. It's because I'm doing it for me, not for anybody else. So that's what I
So basically self-care, and I think this self-care is the theme that kind of has emerged here.
You can stand up, you can sit if you want, whatever you want. You do what you want, you do you.
Boo.
You know what? Is this on?
No.
All right.
No one can hear you.
Hi, I'm Janelle Hanchett. Is that what I was supposed to say? Yeah. Okay. I was thinking about what Wanda was saying about like wanting a silver bullet and and being, well, you didn't say the word silver. Work with me here. Work with me here. She didn't say silver bullet. But you wanted an answer. We want like a fast track. You know what? I'm done. We're done. We're done. And I'm off track now. Oh, right. And so what I love about the panoramic is that the whole house of cards fell. And like all the BS that I feel like we've been fed, forever, we were like, oh, weird, it's a lie. Turns out the whole freaking thing can just collapse. And the 9 to 5 and all these things you promised us were going to bring us security and meaning and life and future and promise. It's all a bunch of bullshit. Oh, and by the way, it turns out America can hand money and medication to everyone. Weird. So I think everything, all of the delusion collectively died. And I don't know a more vibrant opportunity for writers and artists to speak when everything has crumbled, because we got to rebuild. Like I was thinking about this city right here, and it was all gone. And all this beauty we're looking at and all this insistence on something different and better, I think as a literal world, we're there. And that's what that, but it's like you were saying, it's not particularly pretty process, and it can be lonely and disorienting, because when you've lost the footing you thought you had and all these beliefs you thought of what it all meant and how it was going to unroll. And then you're like, wait, I got to find something new. It's rough, but the community is everything, I think. What am I doing?
It's amazing.
Janelle, that's
One more.
What?
Janelle, yes.
I mean, everybody just makes names up.
Okay.
So yeah, Darnell, Chanel, it's fine.
Okay, so you said something very important. You mentioned writers and artists. And when we were in the midst of the pandemic, of course, healthcare providers, food delivery people, they were the essential people for us. But I don't think we would have survived this pandemic mentally without art, without culture, books, movies, music. So, great. It's great that you mentioned that because what we do is valid,
Very true. Yeah, absolutely.
Just 1 minute.
What's your name, love?
Rosemary. Follow me on Authentic Food Quest. But together with my partner Claire, we write about local food experiences. And we happened to be in Chicago, as a matter of fact, for a moment in time. And we were living in the West, near Greektown. And one of the things we do is portray local businesses. And one thing that shocked me, moved me, stayed with me, was looking at small business owners, restaurant owners particularly, because that's my focus, and their desperation, their desire to keep their businesses open, but unable to because of the situation we were in. And so that moment of those conversations, and it's in their eyes, when they were doing everything they could. Fortunately, as you mentioned, the government did provide some finances, a little bit,
Yeah.
but there was at least a way out in the U.S.
For sure.
But not everyone had access to that. Not everyone, not all their staff, they could not always keep their staff, even if they got some funding. But the support that we needed to give small business owners, I think continues today. And that, when we could come together and tell our community members, go local. The big restaurant businesses are still open. Yes, you want to get out. Yes, you might do some takeaway. But go down to that shop there that's owned by, Mr. and Mrs. XYZ. They're the ones that need you the most. And that for me, was very impactful and continues to be.
And if you're starting to cry now, just wait. We've got a whole show in store for you this morning. Thank you all. I'm gonna cut this because we all need to take a little bit of a break. But can I just get a huge round of applause for each of you brought up a whole conversation of its own, and that we don't have time for, that I would love to discuss about the travel industry, about how we've supported each other, about how we've looked at travel in a completely different lens than we did, 2 years ago. And I hope that we continue to have these conversations together. In the meantime, though, there's coffee outside. There are restrooms around the corner this way, I believe, yes. And we're gonna take a 10-minute break. We're gonna regroup at 11:30. So stretch your legs, get up. We're gonna come back in here and have another really amazing conversation. Thank you all.
The coffee machine on our side is open.
What? The coffee machine on our side is